On a bright, peaceful afternoon, one of those rare days where the world seems so gentle that you begin to believe nothing bad could possibly happen. The sunlight spilled across the parking lot of a classic, red-trimmed diner. The white paint gleamed under the sun, the windows reflected warm gold, and the soft hum of passing cars blended into the quiet, lazy rhythm of the day. But beneath that calm, something heartbreaking was about to unfold. Something so unexpected, so cruel, and so deeply unfair that it could shatter even the strongest heart. It began with an elderly woman named Marina Hull, standing quietly outside the diner with her small, worn purse held close to her chest. She looked fragile, the type of person life had already tested too many times. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to read the lips of the teens who had gathered around her. She tilted her head, squinting, leaning forward, not because she was confused or slow, but because she was completely deaf. And the teens knew it, but they weren't helping her. They weren't checking if she was lost or needed assistance. They weren't even being neutral. They were mocking her, filming her, circling her like predators who had sniffed out someone they could torment without consequence. And in that moment, under that warm, forgiving sunlight, the world felt painfully unfair. Before we go deeper into the story, if you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because stories like these, stories that remind us what humanity should be, deserve to be heard. Marina had come to the diner alone that day, as she always did. She was 83 years old, gentle, soft-spoken, and profoundly deaf after an illness took her hearing years ago. The world had gone silent for her long before her hair turned white, and the silence had become both her companion and her burden. She lived alone in a small apartment filled with memories, old photographs of her late husband, postcards from places she once dreamed of visiting, cracked porcelain teacups that she kept not because she used them, but because they reminded her of conversations she could no longer hear. The only sounds she remembered vividly were the ones she carried in her heart. Her husband humming, rain tapping against the window, the voice of her daughter before life pulled them apart. Every afternoon, Marina visited the same diner, not because she loved the food, but because she loved watching life move. She loved seeing families laugh, kids tugging at their parents' sleeves, couples sharing secrets in low voices. Even if she couldn't hear the noise, she could feel the warmth. It made her feel less alone. But today, the laughter wasn't kind. The teens who approached her, led by a boy named Troy Maddox, the type of boy who bragged loudly but carried very little inside, weren't interested in kindness. They were interested in entertainment, and they believed they had found it. Troy lifted his phone and began recording. His friends followed suit. They exaggerated their lip movements, making childish faces as if mocking her inability to understand. They clapped behind her head to see if she would flinch. One of the girls snatched her napkin and threw it behind her, pretending Marina had dropped it. Another mimicked her slow movements, mocking her age. Marina could read their faces well enough to understand the cruelty, but the words remained inaccessible to her, floating beyond reach like knives carved from silence. She tried to ask for space. She tried to tell them she couldn't hear. She tried to step away. But Troy stepped closer, grinning, holding a fake microphone he used for his online pranks. His friends erupted with laughter as he pretended to interview her, shoving the toy toward her face, speaking quickly so she couldn't possibly keep up. Marina's eyes widened in confusion, then fear. Then Troy nudged her shoulder, not violently, just enough to make her lose her already fragile balance. Marina fell to the asphalt with a gasp she couldn't hear herself make. Her palms scraped the rough ground, and pain shot up her frail arm. The burger she had bought for herself, her one small treat of the day, rolled away, untouched. She reached for it with trembling fingers, trying desperately to hold on to something familiar. Her eyes filled not with tears, but with a deep, aching grief, one that came from the knowledge that the world could be so unkind, even when she asked so little of it. The teens? They laughed. Cars passed by. People watched but didn't step in. Someone shook their head but did nothing more. And Marina tried so hard to push herself up, but her hands shook too fiercely. She looked impossibly small then, like a fragile leaf caught in a storm of cruelty She didn't understand. That was when the rumble began. At first, it was faint. So faint the teens didn't even notice. A low vibration beneath the ground, like distant thunder. But slowly it grew louder, deeper, stronger, until it rolled across the parking lot, like a warning. The teens paused. The laughter died. Heads turned. The rumble intensified. Not one engine, but many. The kind of sound that demands attention even before you see where it's coming from. Then the motorcycles appeared. One. Then another. Then 7 more, moving in deliberate formation, engines growling like a pack of wolves returning home. They wore black leather vests with steel-gray patches and badges that gleamed in the sun. Their presence was powerful yet calm, like storm clouds that knew exactly where they belonged. Their vests read, Guardians of Solace, a group known in town for helping elderly residents, veterans, and anyone who had no one else to protect them. People respected them. Some even feared them. But everyone knew they were men and women with honor carved into their bones. At the front rode a towering man with a braided white beard, Roganvale, a man people whispered about, a man who was gentle until someone tested his patience, calm until someone threatened the vulnerable, silent until something demanded justice. The moment Rogan stepped off his bike and saw Marina on the ground, something behind his eyes snapped into focus. He didn't need to hear anything to understand everything. Pain looks the same in every language. So does disrespect. So does cruelty. He walked forward, each heavy step landing with purpose. His shadow stretched across the pavement, falling over Troy like a forewarning. The other bikers fanned out behind him, forming a protective half-circle around Marina, blocking the teens entirely. Troy opened his mouth to speak, a joke, an excuse, something. But his voice cracked before the words even came out. He wasn't facing a frail, elderly woman anymore. He was facing a wall. Rogan crouched beside Marina with a gentleness that didn't match his size. He placed a steady hand behind her back. Helping her sit up, he picked up her fallen burger with slow, careful movements, like it was something precious, something worth more than the pride of the bullies who had knocked it from her hands. Marina looked at him with confusion, then relief, then the smallest spark of safety. The kind you feel when someone sees you, truly sees you, for the first time in a long while. Rogan wasn't angry at her. He was angry for her, and that made all the difference in the world. Rogan stood slowly, rising to his full height like a storm building. His gaze settled on Troy and the other teens, steady, unblinking, and cold enough to make even the bravest heart stumble. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The silence he held between them was heavier than any roar. Troy swallowed hard. His phone trembled in his hand. One of the girls quickly lowered hers, suddenly unable to meet anyone's eyes. The others shifted back instinctively, their earlier arrogance draining away like water leaking through cracked glass. It became painfully clear that they hadn't expected consequences. They hadn't expected anyone to defend her. They certainly hadn't expected him. Before anyone could speak, Rogan gave a subtle hand signal to a woman in the group, a biker with streaks of silver in her dark hair and eyes that held kindness like a second language. Kira Vale, Rogan's sister, and one of the most respected members of the Guardians of Solace. Kira stepped forward, her movements calm, grounded. She knelt beside Marina and gently helped her stand. Then with slow, clear motion, she signed, "You're safe. We're here with you." Marina blinked at her, shoulders trembling with relief. She lifted her hands to reply, hesitant, shaky, but Kira nodded encouragingly, giving her time. Their brief exchange felt like the first warm light after a long night. All the while, the 9 bikers stood like silent sentinels, their protective presence filling the parking lot with a gravity the bullies couldn't ignore. Troy's friend stepped back again. Then again, each backward shuffle a wordless apology their lips couldn't form. Rogan finally spoke, not loud, not angry, just controlled, firm, and sharp enough to cut through the false bravado in front of him. Enough. One word. That was all it took. The teens froze. The laughter that had filled the air minutes earlier shrank into something brittle and pitiful. One of the boys muttered something like, we didn't mean. But Rogan shut him down with a single look. This wasn't a man who tolerated excuses. He valued accountability, and he knew cruelty when he saw it. Troy looked toward the exit, but Rogan blocked his line of sight, not trapping him, just reminding him that leaving wasn't an escape from responsibility. The boy's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Rogan didn't cuss. He didn't threaten. He simply said, "Walk away." But the tone made it clear what he meant. Walk away and reflect, not repeat. And for once, the teens listened. Troy turned first, staring at the ground, his phone hanging uselessly at his side. His friends followed him, one of them wiping at her eyes, face burning from shame rather than fear. They disappeared around the corner, without a single word. When the last of them vanished, the atmosphere shifted. The tension eased. The rough energy settled into something calmer, softer, safer. Rogan exhaled slowly and turned back to Marina. Kira supported the elderly woman with gentle hands as they led her inside the diner. The staff, who had watched everything unfold through the windows, hurried forward, offering water, warm towels, comforting smiles. Shame pricked their hearts for not having stepped in sooner. The manager asked Rogan quietly, "Is she okay?" "She will be," Rogan said, his voice carrying quiet certainty. They seated Marina in a cozy booth near the window, the same booth she'd always sat in. But this time it wasn't out of habit or routine. It was out of protection, surrounded by people who cared. The staff brought her a fresh meal, hot tea, and extra napkins. Kira sat beside her, signing patiently, repeating words slowly until Marina's shaking hand steadied enough to respond. Rogan didn't sit. He stood at the entrance, arms crossed, jaw firm, like a guardian watching over a sacred space. The other bikers took different spots around the diner, not intruding, not smothering, but quietly present. Their presence alone created a sense of security no lock on the door ever could. As Marina ate, her fingers finally stopped trembling. She looked around at the people who had become her unexpected protectors. Her eyes softened, the fear drained from her face, replaced by a gentle gratitude. Near the end of the meal, Marina reached out and touched Rogan's hand lightly. He crouched down beside her so she could see his face clearly. She read his lips as he spoke slowly. "You're not alone. Not today. Not ever again." Her eyes welled, not with fear this time, but with warmth. She blinked repeatedly, tried to hold the emotion in, but a single tear escaped anyway. Kira squeezed her hand reassuringly. For the first time in a long time, Marina didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel like someone drifting alone in the silence of her world. She felt seen, protected, valued. When Rogan and the Guardians of Solace finally stepped out of the diner, the sunlight fell across them like a blessing. They didn't ride off immediately. Rogan turned back to glance through the window, watching Marina smile at something Kira signed to her. And in that moment, he felt something settle peacefully inside his chest. Justice delivered quietly is still justice. Sometimes it's even stronger than the loud kind. If this story touched your heart today, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Stories like this remind us that even in broad daylight, even in the midst of cruelty, humanity can choose to rise. Before we end, please comment something kind below, something you want an elderly or vulnerable person to hear today. Your words may reach someone who needs them more than you'll ever know. On that bright afternoon where cruelty tried to win, 9 bikers with brave hearts turned the tide, proving once again that kindness, when it arrives, can change everything.